I will welcome everybody. We have 48 participants online, and I imagine a few more are joining as I speak. So welcome everybody from wherever you are. I'm ringing in from Florence, and we are, I think, probably scattered across Europe, if not the world. I'm a senior advisor at Rudd Peterson Public Affairs in Brussels, and I'm going to be moderating this session. So thank you very much for joining this event, which is organized by the European Heating Industries Association. And we will be first to hear from Federica Savati, who's the Secretary General of EHI, and she's going to tell us a few words about the subject of today's webinar. Federica, over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to our speakers today, and thank you so much for your time today. We have organized this webinar today on a topic that is very dear to our heart and to our business. As heating manufacturers, as you know, we produce a number of products for heating buildings at all level, residential, commercial, industrial, and the residential market is particularly interesting in these very days with the energy crisis. We are seeing energy prices going up, and the preoccupation of many of our customers or our consumers is going really into, how are we going to heat our buildings, our homes this winter and the next winters? What are the best technologies that can cut consumption, that can, make our system more efficient? And all of these questions are very often, or in 95% of cases, answered not directly by the manufacturers, but by a professional, a technician, an installer, that is actually the link between the technologies, if you want, and the industry that produces the heating technologies and the final user and the consumer, which is everybody of us. So we are now facing a difficult winter, probably, but we are also facing an interesting time for this industry and for its supply chain, because the energy transition is really calling for a big renovation wave. And so we know that we have climate goals that we need to reach by 2050. In order to do that, we will need the technologies that this industry is producing, and we will need a lot of installers to install them. The installers are therefore for us both a gateway for new technology, but possibly also present a roadblocker, in the sense that we're seeing at the moment a shortage of them. And sometimes also, for a large part even, and disalignment between the skills that they need to install new technologies and what actually is in their skill set today. So we wanted to talk about this issue today, raise the topic, and make a little bit more light on this in terms of quality and quantity, with a number of partners that have kindly agreed to be with us and go a bit deeper in this subject, which is very much at the heart of the energy transition, I think, but also of our economic and jobs agenda in Europe. It offers opportunities and challenges, and this is what we wanted to discuss today in this webinar. So thanks again for our guests today, and I look forward to a nice discussion with you. Peter.
Okay, so thank you, Federica. So I will introduce the panelists one by one before they intervene for the first time, but we've got a great panel lined up. We kick off with a member of the European Parliament, Morten Petersen. Thank you for joining. You're, among other things, and parliamentarians are always on many things, but you're one of the shadow rapporteurs, I believe, for the Energy Performance of Buildings Amendment. Now, really, to you, I would put the question, trying to sort of dwell a bit more on problem diagnosis. Is there a skill shortage, or could there be a skill shortage that hamper our efforts to decarbonize the building sector?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for inviting me today. I've been looking forward to this, and the short answer is obviously yes. There is a problem. I mean, there is a shortage, and looking, say, across the member states, the economies. I mean, this is not only applicable to the heating sector. I mean, this is very general that we have a severe shortage of people that we obviously need in order to foster and speed up this transition. So it is a real issue. In my own country, Denmark, we have waiting times for like months to install all the right stuff, be it heat pumps or be it say EV chargers, what have you. This is really a serious challenge to be overcome in order to ensure that we actually get where we want to get to, and I take it and I expect us to get back to this in discussion that are obviously widely differing practices across member states in terms of culture, of traditions, of history in this. And just to mention a small example that I wasn't aware of in my own country, we apparently have a tradition of separating heating qualifications vis-a-vis cooling qualifications in terms of installing stuff. And I was simply, and this is my fault, unaware of this thing, but it's just to illustrate that we have to think differently in terms of curriculum in order to ensure that we have some coherence or integration of skills, and adding to this, obviously, getting the people that we need to do this. So sorry for being so long, but the short answer is yes. And this problem is serious because it's going to hamper the speed of the green transition, which is obviously detrimental to all of us in case we do not succeed in also ensuring that we have the labor force, the skilled labor force that we need. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks very much, Morten. That's framing the discussion very well. We're going to come on in the latter part into the sort of solutions that we might be able to think of. Perhaps next, I'm going to invite Veerle Bellaerts, who's the technical director of EHI, and she might, Veerle, you might like to add a few words about the report, because I know you were instrumental in its writing, if I'm not mistaken. So please, over to you to just expand a bit on the problem. We've heard Morten was saying practice varies. Is that absolutely a problem, perhaps, or is it just part of the richness of the solution? Over to you.
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, everyone. And indeed, I mean, there are a couple of problems that we have identified in our study. And I think one of them is indeed diversity in all the member states on what the basic education is that national authorities are offering. Some are regularly updated, sometimes it includes the state of the art, but in many cases it does not. So it means that there's no one-size-fits-all solution in Europe to update the training to a certain standard that includes all information on the efficient, renewable and renewable-ready appliances. An additional issue that we see is that the profession of an installer is not very attractive for young people. So something needs to be done to raise awareness to these young people to show how interesting this job could be. And then finally, when we have installers, existing installers that, well, today install the more conventional technologies, well, they need to be upskilled, as Federica explained, but they are not always willing to take any courses because every day in class is a day without income. So to overcome the issues, I mean, we all need to work together. And when I say we, I mean EU legislators, but also national and regional public administrators, and us, the industry. We have some recommendations, if I may, that I can already explain to you. And of course, I mean, this is just a starting point for the discussion. Just touch on them.
Yeah, because we'll come back and dwell on them more later. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So for EU legislators, we think it could be useful to provide guidance to member states to say what should be in that basic education to make sure that all the renewable and renewable ready appliances are covered. But it would also be interesting if they would require member states to do the exercise and to calculate what the difference is between the number of installers we have today and the number we need in the future. For national legislators, we think that the regular update of the curricula is important. Also, discussing between the environmental policy and labor skills policies will be necessary, because it's good to have an environmental target, but to get to that target, we need the professionals to support it, and that's very important. But also to raise awareness, indeed, as I already said, for the young professional, and also to provide financial support maybe for the existing installers to make upskilling more interesting for them.
Can I just ask one little question to you as a sort of supplementary? Are we saying at the end of the day that heating installers are going to have to be more qualified than today? Not just more of them, but more qualified?
I think, yes, qualification will be a bit different. So they will have to learn new skills. So in addition to learning to work with, for example, the gas heaters, which are used to today, they will have to include the electrical components, but also work on digitalization. So we will go to more and more smart appliances, which means that those appliances can either work or stop working based on signals from the electricity grid, for example. It also involves hybridization, so installing a two different heating installations and making sure they work together in an efficient way. So it is, I mean, yes, indeed, they will have to learn other skills and more advanced skills than they know today.
Yeah, upskilling, I suppose, as well as
indeed.
increasing number. Okay, now we're going to move across to the industry, and I'd like to introduce Fernando Sigor-Ximenez, Secretary General of the European Builders Confederation. Thanks for joining us, Fernando. Now, we've already heard from Morten that this is a skills shortage, quite a widespread skills shortage, but I imagine it's impacting the building sector a lot. Is that true? I mean, is this just a microcosm sort of the building industry's challenges right now?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the question. Indeed, maybe a word about EBC before going further so that people understand who we are. We are the European organization representing construction crafts and SMEs, which means that our members are National Association of Construction SMEs. So let's say we cover trades ranging from general contractors, bricklayers, carpenters, joiners, plumbers, but also energy installers. And I think that I should also start with thanking EHI for an invitation, because I think this topic is really timely. I think we've all heard of the declarations of President van der Leyen about next year, big plans, and it's really important that we start discussing this further. And to respond to your question, Peter, unfortunately, it goes way beyond the issue of installers, because in construction, it's a historic structural issue that we have regarding workforce. We are not good enough at attracting new talent. We are not good enough at retaining them. We are not good enough to provide, let's say, the right formula for upskilling and reskilling of the current workforce. So considering that, installer is a main issue, considering, let's say, the political panorama right now and the political ambitions we have. But let's keep in mind that, and I fully agree with what was said before, that the cultural aspect is very important, considering that the education training is a national competence. So we have very different considerations for vocational trades across Europe, and this is already a main obstacle to any ambition regarding the update of skills in the construction industry. So just to take an example, we all know about Germany, which is often mentioned as an, let's say, an example to follow, because, let's say, masters are well considered, construction trades are well considered, but I'm Belgian myself, and believe me, at least in Brussels and in Belgium, vocational trade is the last resort when you fail all other type of education. So that's the kind of cultural issue that we need to tackle. But all in all, I think I will have way more time to develop about this, but definitely it's a very structural issue that we have.
Thanks so much, Fernando. And we move straight on to Patrick Crombez, who works for Daikin Europe. You're a manufacturer of heat pumps. And, you know, we've just heard from Fernando. He reminded us that education's a competence of member states. Some member states might say, you know, training people to install equipment is the equipment manufacturer's responsibility. tell me, is this a break? Is the lack of installers a break on your sales? Patrick, over to you.
Well, in all fairness, I think as it stands today, it's possibly not, but we're just at the start of the wave. I mean, it's the intention of the renovation wave is that a lot of old installations need to be renovated, let's say, before they come to normal end of life, and this will create additional demand on pure installation capacity. On the other hand, I've seen that there's a question in the chat as well that is indeed saying that installers in general, they do want to do professional things in the right way. So they have an interest of being trained. And I agree that it's a big task for the manufacturers to actually provide that. And I think most of us are quite engaged in that, because the last thing we all want is to have installations that are not running correctly and are there causing issues for the customer. So that's a responsibility, I think, that clearly is sitting at manufacturers. And most of us have engaged quite heavily in that. Either on our own or in cooperation with utility companies, with local schools. It takes different kinds of forms, as Fernando was saying, depending on the situation in each country. And the point is really that it's not about as such upgrading, because that would somewhere indicate that the level is not okay. It's a different kind of training. I think that's what Wille was saying. It's different skills that are needed on top of what they already know. Which tends to go more indeed into digitalization, optimizing the equipment, selecting the equipment better or different than before. And it's these kind of things that have to come into play. One additional thing I would like to add before I finish, that indeed at present time, it does take more time to install a heat pump than it does to install a traditional gas boiler. So that then again will then create job opportunities. That's the positive point. And I think it's then all up to us, I think, gathered here to see how we can get, I would just say, get more people into the trade.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that there's more jobs creation going on. And that's something we've obviously got to encourage. But it does sound to me like these are going to have to be more qualified people who might, of course, expect a higher remuneration. I mean, it's just a thought that crosses my mind. And if there's a scarcity, of course, one would expect perhaps remuneration rates to reflect that scarcity. So anyway, I turn to Stefan Moser, head of units in DG Energy, and former colleague of mine when I was in the Commission. It's nice to see you, Stefan. Thank you for joining this webinar. Now, the European Commission is really sticking its neck out, saying the Green Deal is a priority for this mandate. And so many things have got in the way. In the meantime, I think of COVID, of course, and now this acute energy crisis that we're in. But both of those crises seem to send a message that, or the Commission anyway, has sent the message that we should double down on our decarbonisation efforts, which I fully endorse as a strategy. And maybe there's other things we have to do as well in the current circumstances, but doubling down is what it's about. It's about delivering higher ambition. Now, what about this shortage of skills in this particularly crucial sector of building abatement of building emissions? Stefan, over to you. Oh, your microphone's still off. You've got to unmute.
I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't see that.
No worries.
Good afternoon, Peter, to all of you, Mr. Peterson, and colleagues from EHI and from industry. So it's a great pleasure to be here. I fully see that constraint. We have several constraints. I think what you said, Peter, is indeed the in principle reassuring message that the additional challenges on energy security, but also energy prices pull us in the same direction as we were going anyway already on the Green Deal, and actually COVID as well, because it has been one way of stimulating the economy to invest in and more quickly in things which we needed to do anyway, and that is in particular also the building sector as the largest energy consumer and also emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. And for that reason, also in reaction to the atrocious attack by Russia against Ukraine, the Commission came out with the REPowerEU plan in May, which set also much more ambitious figures for heat pumps than were previously envisaged. So more than a doubling of what actually was already going to be the case under the previous Green Deal proposals and current trends. And for that, we need to make sure that we overcome different constraints. And one of them, one of the most significant ones, is the skills challenge. I think we do recognize the problem. I think we are there to solve problems. We cannot basically stand there and say there are problems, therefore we have to slow down. We have to see how we strategically address that. And I think one of the challenges will be to overcome the knowledge gaps that basically the courses, the training programs, professional training will be upgraded so that they contain also what young installers or actually retrained installers will need to know for the new decarbonized energy system. So complementing what they have so far been learning over the years, and that includes then of course also those who are already active in the sector, that they have to complement their existing skills with other additional skills. And I think that is one challenge, to establish what actually do they need to know, what is actually the curriculum which needs to be brought to them, and enable the training organizations, institutes in charge of professional training, but also educating young people, either technical or university, with the content, that the content is there. Then of course you need the capacity of courses, you need the people who are interested in that, so it comes together. And I think the Commission can help to bring together the good practices in terms of content, but also of course help with funding and ensuring a more strategic approach in the member states to expand the capacities. And I think one of the key proposals of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is to have national building renovation plans. A task of those plans is to identify the barriers which we have to overcome. Of course, physical shortages of building materials, but also the people needed to execute, basically to implement the renovations. And there we need basically a clear understanding how many people are needed. How many do we have currently? What are the trends, demographic trends, but also otherwise shifts between sectors? What is missing? And then put in place the necessary programs to attract those people. Part of that is, of course, to make the sector more attractive by increasing salaries. That is for up to the social partners, it's not for the state. But that is an obvious precondition to attracting more people. But then, of course, also to make sure that there's enough capacity for training institutes, that the right content is provided, that basically this is taken up. This is not just some new thing which most people ignore for a while and then carry on with the old curriculum. So this has to be imposed. And I think there can be a lot of exchange of good practices at the European level. Legislative, I would say, as part of the EPBD, to address the challenge through the building renovation plans. And of course, we have also European-wide initiatives like the Pact for Skills, where we bring together, there are funding opportunities. So I think at that, I would like to keep it here, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Stefan. So, you know, you're transitioning into the second phase of our discussion, where I'm going to invite all the speakers to chip in and say what they think they can do. You did mention the National Energy and Climate Plans, and you mentioned the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. I remember in simplistic terms, that is thought of in my mind as being a legislation that addresses new build. But of course, this particular problem is as much, if not considerably greater, in terms of retrofitting existing buildings. But anyway, I turn back to Morten Petersen. So you are a legislator, you are one of the people who can put things in legislation. And I was wondering what you might think to do in order to double down on this particular shortage that we all agree needs solving? Over to you.
Oh, thanks, Peter. But that is an extremely difficult question to answer, given that we have these shortages all across sectors, and again, coming back to the point also made by Stefan, that I mean, obviously, this is very much a member state's prerogative to ensure that curriculums and systems and standards are in place. So this is, I mean, this is a very difficult thing to do, not least on a pan-European level, given all the sensitivities at national level, and given that educational matters are obviously within member states. I think on a very in the very big and broad picture, I think what Stefan said was really good and interesting. I mean, what we see now is that issues like energy efficiency and buildings directive is, I mean, things as nerdy and technical as these issues are now becoming security politics from very top shelf, and this is new. I mean, we've all of us been used to focus on, say, the generation side, on how many offshore wind farms or parks or PV or what have you, which is visible and tangible and what have you. We've all been accustomed to this being key issues, at least in political terms. But what is happening now is so important and long overdue, you could argue, that these kind of issues are becoming security politics and of prime political interest. So I think the challenge we all face is obviously the general lack of labor. We wanted to, from a policy side, to make it as convenient as possible to do the right thing, to say install a heat pump. Problem being that, and we all have, I'd say, myriads of anecdotes on how difficult this is in real life, given traditions and cultures and things you want to change in order to make it more convenient to install a heat pump or other applications in fostering the green transition. So this is a very broad and difficult discussion, and my reflection is, to which extent harmonizing or standardizing some of these applications, and which is in essence is more or less some of the stuff that we'll be trying to do in the buildings directive, to move along those lines in order to perhaps also make qualifications more standardized across the union. I don't know. I mean, this is an open question that I also appreciate your thoughts on, because it is a real issue. It is a real problem that also has to do with national traditions and cultures that we have to, if not overcome, then at least develop and work with in order to ensure that we maintain the speed that we want to maintain. But it's difficult. It is extremely difficult, Peter. Thanks.
I must say, I like your analogy about this, sudden appreciation that we're having of its geopolitical importance. Things like this, because these are the bottlenecks that are going to stop us moving forward. Just like in the case of war, it's the supply lines which are so critical to any advance. You can't go beyond supply lines, and this is part of our supply constraints. I'm struck though how, as you say, it is a complex situation, and I'm wondering to what extent simplicity can prevail, or at least help us. I mean, in my childhood, the heating source of choice was coal at home and at school, in Northern England, where I grew up. And now it's everything except simple. There's almost too much choice. And you need specialist advice, I think, more and more. And we rely on the suppliers to give us information. I think the suppliers that we usually use to maintain our existing heating systems are also the people we ask, what should we do when they need replacing? And so, how well-informed they are is as much of an issue as how capable they are of installing it. But anyway, what I'll do is, Vera, you're a specialist of this area. it's getting complicated, isn't it? Isn't this working a bit against us? Can't they have in the shops, and I'm grossly simplifying for the sake of the example, but, you know, off the shelf DIY heat pumps, which you can, you know, take home, plug in. Tell me why things have to be so complicated, if they do at all.
I think this is more a question for Patrick maybe than for me, but I can already start with it. So I think, I mean, the heating installation is not just a plug and play appliance. I mean, it needs to be installed in a good way. It needs to be balanced. So you need to make sure, I mean, it's not just the appliance, but it's the whole system. So it needs to be balanced. It needs to work properly in the building, in the place it's installed. So it's not a simple thing that you can just put in there. There needs to be a specialist there. Even for, I mean, a boiler, there needed to be a specialist. For a heat pump, that's the same. But yeah, so the necessary skills are needed to install all of these appliances, ranging from a boiler, micro CHP, a hybrid heat pump or heat pump. So as you say, there's so many different appliances on the market that all needs to be installed in a specific building. And for all of this, different skills are needed.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Now, Patrick, I come to you and then I go to Fernando. Patrick, are heat pumps intrinsically complex? And, you know, are the days of DIY plumbing all gone?
I'm afraid I would have to confirm that to some extent. Having said that, it's down to us as manufacturers to make them more simple, and that's definitely in the books. I think all of us are working towards having more possibilities to fine-tune equipment remotely. So we don't necessarily have to go to site again to fine-tune equipment, to change parameters remotely, to be able to even detect errors remotely, and to just cut down as much as possible on the complexity. Second point is then to help the installers to select the equipment more correctly and more quickly as well. So most of us are investing in digital tools that help people sizing the equipment to the extent of what is needed for that particular application, and then again fine-tune it accordingly. So and this is what most of us are actually working on today, to indeed try to cut back on the installation time. Next to that, again, pure training is there. As Veerle was saying, training was also needed on traditional equipment. So that's a hurdle that somewhere has to be overcome. Once that is done, I think it's up to us as producers to make sure that it becomes as simple as possible. Yeah.
Okay, and thank you. Fernando, I move over to you. I mean, what are we going to do to get more people into the workforce? I mean, they don't have to necessarily be as strong physically, brawny as in the past. So doesn't that extend the potential pool of labor?
There are many potential solutions, let's say, but if you don't mind, I'll start with a legislative option, because we touch upon it. And I think that's one of the reasons that led the European Heating Industry Association to draft the report on installer skills. Because I think one of the main issues we have is that we don't have reliable data on the construction skills need at national level. So when Mr. Petersen says that what can we do, maybe a first step is to assess how many photovoltaic installers we need, heat pump installers we need, hydrogen experts, electricians, etc. in each member state, so that by answering to that question, we are in a better position to quantify the real needs in terms of workforce, which then a next step would be to use that information to reshape, update, create new training programs and apprenticeship schemes. That could be an important tool, considering also that in the EED, MEP Vogelsang managed to get consideration for regular assessment of gaps, dedicated platforms to upskill and reskill. I think we have tools that could help us go in that direction, where we change the image of the industry, showing that it has an evolution. Definitely, you said something that is not enoughly regarded, is that construction is full of stereotypes. Is full of heavy tasks, burdensome tasks, and for many years, we have been suffering from that image. So something that we need to know is to change the narrative about what the construction actually is, construction sector actually is. So to do that, yes, social partners as ourselves could go deeper into promotion campaigns, show better how trades evolved, what new career opportunities are there, and maybe also target certain groups, demographic groups that haven't been as represented today. Let's think about women participation in construction. We know it's around 10% of the construction workforce today. 10% means nothing. So there is a lot of room for improvement there because we can show and better showcase how mechanization, digitalization, the awareness of the environmental concerns that are actually caused by the impact of our industry in the sector have shaped the jobs, the profession in our sector, so that we tell them, okay, guys, you have that image has completely changed, and this is the first step. And something that I would like to mention again, because for me it's really crucial, is the cultural element. We said about the consideration for education, vocational education and training. We also need to target parents. It's not only about youth to pick the right career. We also need parents to be in a position to say, this is a highly regarded and valuable profession that also should be given a try. And that is also part of the cultural mindset that we need to change. So parents is one, youth attracting new talents is another one. And also let's look internally what we are maybe not doing good enough, in the sense that we know that in certain countries there is a kind of resistance to change. And so maybe there we also need a different mindset, saying that our contractors, our construction SMEs, construction stakeholders really deeply get involved in the digitalization and the greening, as we call it, of the sector.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the other questions that's come in is about the image of the job. Rolf has been highlighting the fact that, you know, it's not been a very highly regarded profession. I think that ought to change, and with the right communication, it can change. I'm here in Florence because I also teach part-time at a university, and young people are very committed to the climate, and we need every type of skill to, you know, all hands on deck to try and resolve this challenge. So I think it's something that could be rebranded as a solution provider, you know, to societal problems, climate change being the one first and foremost. Another thought that I had as you were talking, Fernando, it was very interesting, was if we know how many heat pumps we want there to be deployed between now and 2030, surely from what Patrick was saying, heat pumps require a bit more time to be installed. I might be wrong, but something in the region of 15 hours stays in my mind. That obviously it's an average, an approximation, but we could multiply the number of heat pumps by the time that it's going to take, and we could work out how many people are going to be needed, full-time jobs are going to be needed to deploy that number. And it gives us some idea of the demand just on heat pumps. And I'm not saying the only heating systems are heat pumps. There's a whole range of heating systems. But perhaps when we set targets, we should be very mindful of the building blocks that are going to lead to the fulfillment of those targets. And then perhaps we come back to the Commission and ask them to perhaps vet, you know, national plans with a view to the coherence, both in terms of numbers deployed in a member state and its ability to meet those numbers given the constraints on skills. Is that the sort of role, Stefan, you feel you might be able to fulfill in the Commission? You presumably are going to be, I mean, I know for a fact you're going to be reviewing these national energy and climate plans. And so there must be a chance for you, perhaps even as soon as next year, to be looking at drafts of the plans and saying, come on, member states, our sums are that you're going to need more of this or that. Stefan, have you got any the resources to do this kind of thing as well?
Absolutely, Peter. I mean, resources are always a challenge, of course, but this is exactly what we need to do. So there needs to be assurance that member states do the sums, as you said, basically estimate the number of heating systems serving the energy and climate transition to be put in place, calculate an estimate basically based on the best possible data, the number of people needed, and see how many will be there on the basis of current developments, also taking into account demographic change, how many people will retire, how many people will likely come in, and then if there will be a shortfall, which I assume will be rather significant, how to close that shortfall. And that is exactly the task which we will need to see also from the Commission, whether this has been or will have been fulfilled by the member states. If not, then the building renovation plans would indeed not live up to what they can deliver as potential, basically as a reference, national reference document, where everyone knows what are the challenges, what needs to be scaled up in terms of investments, including in training and upskilling and attracting people. And I think by underlining the importance, as you, but also Fernando and others have said, the usefulness and the I would say crucial nature of installers having those skills for society, the reputation will definitely go up. This will be a highly regarded job, even more than today. We need to make sure that the reputation basically benefits from the political attention, and this is then basically also motivating young people to get in. But of course, I think in a market economy, you could expect, if there's a kind of shortage of workers, you need to react by offering more attractive packages, salary, but also working conditions. This will be a consequence. Of course, it will add to the costs of the energy transition, but I think we are in a market economy, so to attract resources, in this case human resources, people to the sector, you need to say, come here you get an attractive and interesting new employment, and then you have a very good argument in basically convincing young people and also people from other sectors to come in. It's a huge opportunity. It's great that we are basically in a position collectively to offer new chances to people. Unemployment today is much less of an issue than it was just 10 or 15 years ago, where we had huge numbers of young people who didn't even know how they could be useful for society. This problem has gone away. It's rather the opposite, that with the current demographic trends, we won't have enough people for all the different needs in society within Europe. So we will have to look also at attracting people from outside, which is, of course, a political topic, depending on how you manage migration. But I think this will be necessary to address the various societal needs which we have, and that includes the building sector and the energy transition. But I think we will have to make sure that future funding, current funding is of course possible, but also future funding beyond the current multi-annual financial framework will be upgraded, that there will be a priority on training for the member states, that they can use the funding and should be using the funding for training, for professional education, and basically from that side then close the gap also, because it is of course expensive. And I think I very much welcome also what Patrick has said, that it's important to look at, to make it as simple as possible, as user-friendly and installer-friendly as possible. I think it is an enormous challenge to do that, but I think this is a way to bring more efficiency in the system, of reducing the time needed, for instance, for installing a product which hopefully can be somehow standardized in the future, to make it a kind of routine thing, because of course many workers depend on exact routines, what to do, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So that it becomes then also quicker to do it, requiring less time, and therefore also could reduce costs.
Peter, can I just jump in with one issue because we've been talking about quantification of the sizing of the problem. We've had a little bit ago as an estimate at European level about the number of installers that there are to get heating installers. We're looking at something like 1.5 million people at the moment employed. We tried also to do a work of estimate of how many we would need, looking at indeed REPowerEU, looking at the climate targets that we have, and obviously REPowerEU gives a figure of 10 million heat pumps in the next 5 years, so it's quite a clear target there. We think that at least 50% of more installers we will need to have in order to reach the targets, and 50% of the existing installers will need to be retrained to add those skills that we were talking about. So these are some estimates based on higher electrification scenarios that as industry we're trying to establish, or that we're trying to look at to see indeed what do we need to do, of course, for us also on the production side of the heat pumps, but what do we need to do for the market uptake of those heat pumps? It's not enough that we produce 10 million of them if there is not enough capacity to install them in the time frame that we need. So some figures are there in terms of estimates, probably, and I know that some part of the industry is trying to do that as well at national level, but I think that to my knowledge, there is no systematic study yet of the need of each country. And that could be something that could be a recommendation, I would say, at the European level at least, to do that kind of study or assessment and link that to the delivery of the climate plans of member states. But I guess you probably need to tell them beforehand, before you get the papers to review, Stefan, you probably need to have a first message that goes in and says, okay, that's what we need, let's make your estimate at national level and we see what we can do.
Yeah. Thank you, Federica, for adding those. Stefan, do you want to come in?
I think in principle, this should be even in the EPBD, in the buildings directive, in the annex where the mandatory elements are indicated, to basically have already a kind of chapter on this topic. Yeah. So of course we will provide guidance, recommendations in addition to that, but I think it should be an obligatory chapter for each member state to elaborate on, and I think that's for the co-legislators then hopefully that they would maintain it or would actually reinforce it, possibly even, because it's a key aspect. Another key aspect, of course, is the materials challenge, the shortage of building materials. There also you need a strategic approach, clear message to industry to scale up production capacity of the products which we need, building products, basically construction materials. That has to go hand in hand, both basically fit together. And of course, we have also then on renewable energy, on installers for solar rooftop installations, we have that. We need to see the broader picture there, but clearly this has to be looked at strategically by each member state. And I think also comparing notes between the member states, because of course the labor market, but also the market for products is pan-European and even worldwide in many ways.
Yeah, I must say one of the rich aspects of this report, not only its numerical estimations of the sorts of needs we've got for new qualified heating installers, but it was also the diversity of practice across the EU. And the heartening part of it is that there are some good case studies from member states which can presumably help others replicate. I know every member state's different, but there's already good things going on and some learning's already been done. But I would say that when things go into legislation, they take on a degree of seriousness toward of the member states. They become requirements. Member states take them more seriously. So indeed, I think the legislation is certainly a place where we can put things and then they will take greater note. But ultimately, of course, it's in the member states' own interest to have the installers so that they can decarbonize their own hard-to-abate sectors of the building sector, because they've got their targets under the climate legislation that is specific in 2030 and in 2050. And the delivery of those targets is also critically important and extremely difficult, because the sectors that are left under the effort sharing regulation are those such as buildings and transport and agriculture, all of whose emissions, are difficult to abate. One question, I'm looking at the conversation that's going on and the questions that are being put. Thank you to Oliver and others who have been submitting questions and comments, Leonard as well. If I may just ask one question of clarification, Stefan, would this kind of training program be eligible for receiving money under the Recovery and Resilience Fund? Is it the sort of thing that would fit into that? Because there's an earmarking of the funds, quite a substantial earmarking for climate. Would this be the sort of thing that member states might still put into their plans?
In my view, definitely yes. I would put it under climate and energy. So it's linked to that. It's a precondition. It's intrinsically linked to it. So I would not even put it under training. I would say this is necessary to deliver on climate and energy programs, basically, and measures, and therefore yes, definitely yes. Yeah? So the same on digital skills. We also have digital investments. Yeah, I think part of that is also digital. Yeah? So it's the new energy system, the smart energy system, and that what you said makes it so complicated, and therefore requires also additional support, because it's a challenge to scale up the quantity and quality of skills which we have.
Yeah. Now look, there's a good suggestion in the chat. Rolf has suggested that could we support financially apprentices, as is done, for example, in the Erasmus program or something like that. There are European funds used to facilitate the exchange students. Is this the sort of thing that might already be being done, or certainly perhaps something we could think of in the future? And then where would the finances come from? I'm not quite sure, but perhaps industry will be. Patrick, would they be ready to contribute? You already, I imagine, have quite a big budget, I imagine, for training people to, in the technologies that you provide. Is that not true?
Yeah, I think the people that are involved in training are definitely on a national level as well, because the trainings have to take place as close as possible to avoid time loss. And if you would gather all the numbers on training, I don't think it's as such in the report, but you will end up to easily 40,000-50,000 people that can be trained specifically per year by all the different manufacturers combined across Europe. I don't think I would be far away from that in the different member states, of course. So I think the capacity is there. I think the commitment from the manufacturers is there, and it's also in our own interest, to be very honest, because again, we don't want to have installations that are not running correctly. That is just backfiring. So I think that commitment is definitely there. And we do see, and that's a positive note of this, that the pickup and the skills that have been acquired in the different countries are very different as well. So you've got ranging from 25-30% in Italy, France, to only about 10% maybe in Germany and Poland for the moment. And that sort of like reflects towards the market. So it does give an indication that the installers are ready. If the market is there, if they see a steady business opportunity there, they tend to respond. And I think that's very positive. And then it's all up to us to make sure that we can deliver to that. I definitely would take that one as a positive takeaway, that the installers are ready to pick it up.
Yes, just as in the cars, you can do an automobile engineering degree, but the garages also train employees in particular makes of car and such like. Now, I'm going to ask for wrap-up comments by everybody. I'll say, frankly, Morten, I was inspired by your saying that this is geopolitical. This is getting, this is getting serious, but it's also going up the priorities as this energy crisis unfolds today. But let's face it, there'll be further challenges down the road. So it sounds like that's another good reason for doing it, not just managing to decarbonize, but actually making Europe more energy resilient. would you say?
Oh, absolutely, Peter. And I mean, adding to this, I think we all realize that these measures are all short-term measures that can be applied. I mean, for a wide range of these applications, these are known products or technologies, and I mean, this is a very hands-on approach to solving a real issue, a real problem of security, of autonomy, of what have you. So I think in all the issues at hand, and given the Fit for 55 and all the directives and all the negotiations going on, this is hands-on. This is very immediate. This is very short-term. This is doable. This is hands-on. So I think that, I mean, these issues have so much going for them in terms of implementation and eventually leading to savings in energy or gas imports for that matter. But if I just may pick up on what Fernando said on quantification of the needs, I think that's a great point to make. I think the image discussion is a great point. And then I think simply driven by necessity, the industry will also have to think differently in terms of retaining people that they would not necessarily say lay off or retire or what have you. So there's also a lot of pressure on industry in itself to reform, to adapt, to become more attractive for people to stay on, and obviously also to recruit. And I fully acknowledge that this is a difficult thing to do and a difficult turnaround. But I think it's positive, but you could put it's positive on a sad background, given what's happening with Ukraine and the need for obviously for saving imports. But overall speaking, again, I mean, this is for young people, but hopefully also for old people, a great industry to be in, given the importance of it, which is only becoming more and more significant. Thanks so much, Peter.
Well, I think it's also true, Morten, that this is close to people. I mean, a wind farm might be offshore to so far out I can't see it, but I need a heating installed in my own house. So it comes very close to people, more so perhaps than many other, legislation that requires us not to have any more landfill waste dumps and things like that, which, that's somewhere else. This problem we're talking about is right next to people, and they want it to work in their house because they want to be comfortable there. Very, very real. I just give everyone a minute to wrap up. Morten, thank you for those remarks. Fela, can I come to you and ask for a minute, not more, of closing remark?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Peter. So I think indeed, if we want to solve this issue, I think we'll have to work together and make sure that we increase the visibility of the profession, making it more attractive. I think we will need to continue to do whatever we can, like for us manufacturers, continue to offer trainings to installers, and also really important that we look at the national level, what is still needed and what we can do to ramp it up. Not only in numbers of installers, but also in view of adapting school programs to make sure that we have a full curriculum that covers all the products that we need for the future.
Great. Patrick, would you like to make a closing remark? And then I go to Fernando.
Well, I tend to very much agree with what Veerle is saying. I think we as an industry can provide part of the answer, and that's starting to happen. And it's interesting to see that a number of initiatives are there. The retraining of people that are in industries that are not so favorable for the time being is taking place. I can say that there are initiatives on that side. And ultimately, I think indeed the situation as it is with the climate change is creating this image that we were looking for, that people that are involved in this industry are actually contributing to solving the problem. So I'm also positively looking towards the fact that the image itself of this industry is changing because of the situation. So
yes,
excellent.
I think so. I think so too. And Fernando, perhaps it would change too the image of the industry if there were more women in it. Is among other skills, they can, as Veerle is showing, there are women who can do heat pumps.
Yeah, definitely. But also, just to react to a comment very quickly, from Mr. Moser is that I was smiling when you talk about incentives, because I think it was 2 weeks ago, a Belgian member, Bohuni, set up a study where they noticed that there is 16,000 vacancies for construction professions in Flanders only, which means 10% of the 160,000 that were part of the renovation wave ambition. So this made me think that what better incentive is there than saying people there are business opportunities there. So if you get into this sector, you will have work to do. I don't think there is a better incentive than that one. Then also very, very quickly, for a social partner, we have been part of a project, let's call it project, but it goes beyond that, which is the construction blueprint for skills, which is a major initiative that is trying to provide an update on skills that are needed in the field of energy efficiency, circular economy, digitalization, and health and safety. And this project is coming to an end, and I think it's worth sharing with you that many interesting reports and outcomes are coming. One of those being an interactive map of best practices that we collected in all European countries about good practices in energy efficiency, also including installers, best, let's say, nice stories about installers. The ambition is also to have an observatory of construction skills. I think that could be helpful. And also a kind of guidance for training curricula in the fields of energy efficiency, circular economy, and digitalization again, so that we try to push for a better understanding between different countries in those fields. Thank you very much.
Well, look, thank you, everybody. Stefan, I haven't asked you for a closing word, but you've said a great deal, added a huge amount of value. So forgive me, I'm going to have to close now. I know we all have other calls and meetings to go to. Thank you, all of you, particularly Morten and Stefan, for having joined us. It's been an honor to moderate. Thank you to the 81 or more listeners that there were at the peak moment. And thanks for spending a bit of time with us. Thank you, Frederic, for organizing this event. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and see you again very soon, I hope. Okay, bye.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.